Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start the next part of our program. So keeping to the theme of, we're continuing to decolonize the program in all kinds of interesting ways. Our next part of the program is the En Causer. It began last year as the Sobremesa in the Dominican Republic, and it was set up as this informal after-lunch conversation that happens at Caribbean kitchen tables all over the archipelago, where people sit at the table and they just have these casual conversations. And so it was not really intended as a formal papers being presented, but to bring people together who we thought would have ideas that would overlap and a kind of a synergy. And also because we're trying to bridge the gaps between languages and different linguistic parts of the region, we wanted to have someone from the Francophone Caribbean and from another linguistic part of the Caribbean. We did originally have Florence Alexis on the program to be in conversation with Dr. Toni Bethel-Bennett, but there's been an issue with her departure, and unfortunately she's not going to be able to join us today. But we do have Edouard Duval-Carrier, who is willing to get into the En Causer hot seat. So I'd like to welcome Edouard and Dr. Toni Bethel-Bennett. Toni is a scholar based in the Bahamas at the university there, and Edouard is an artist from Haiti based in Miami, as you know. It's not scheduled really as a Q&A. It's really an informal conversation between two people. So we'd love to have you come up to the stage.
Yes, definitely backed by popular demand. So, okay, we're going to have to...
in Spanish. Joking.
Vamos a hacerlo en español, con inglés, francés y un poco de papiamento, vaya. I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about the work that you presented earlier. So looking at the way you are decolonizing the ruptures between what is mythological, what is institutional, because these are really big barriers that stop a lot of things from flowing.
Well, indeed, I didn't even get to that point in my presentation. For the past 10 years in Miami, they've built this center, and at the same time they were building that center called the Little Haiti Cultural Center. The French government was launching a new program which piggybacked on one that they had started while I lived in Paris, Afrique en Création. So they decided to do one on the Caribbean. And I jumped at the launching of this program, saying that Miami was becoming the epicenter of the contemporary art world, at least for 1 month per year, but that indeed that city was becoming and placing itself in a very peculiar way in the art world. And at the beginning of that particular the Art Basel, et cetera, it was evident that the presence of Caribbean artists was, patently, not visible. Hence, they acquiesced, the French government, decided to help me out in this program, which I called now, which is on its 10th year now, called the Global Caribbean. And I'm very happy that I've started that, because a lot of the artists that were present in those first iteration of that program are now, we're given including me, we're given a special attention by our new museum in Miami, the Perez Museum, and this has furthered, I think has made the international, presence even more pertinent. I'm glad to see that the Perez and with their staff, and particularly the curator-in-chief, Tobias, has, like an interest with the region, which makes it, like something that, should warm all of our hearts here, because it's an important region, very much overlooked, even though we were the center and the epicenter, like the Caribbean was, like 3 centuries ago. I mean, a friend of mine always reminds me this particular story about this ambassador or governor of the Curaçao, who was demoted and sent to New York back then. And the letter, my friend found the letter of a letter by this particular governor in New York, writing to the Queen back then, like claiming what had he done so wrong, the epicenter of the universe, as we all think we are, anyways.
But it brings me right back to the point that we were just discussing. We are the epicenter, but it's an epicenter that is not permitted on our terms. So, and this is where we go back to the whole thing of decolonial. How do we bring communities who are actually actively participating in the life of these areas into the conversation, instead of just looking at them as community outreach? How do we bring them in reach?
Well, that's a daunting task, but at the same time, it is through events like this one, I presume, that that are geared and aiming at first of all disseminating certain ideas that are pertinent, in the art world, in the art practices and everything. I was delighted by this morning's presentation following mine, in the sense, that Carlos was, speaking very hard. Carlos was presenting, a very, important aspect of life, through, the homosexuals, it's very important, and this is something that sometimes not very well discussed in this part of this world, in many parts of the world anyways, and it's time for this to be, laid out on the table, because it's part of the discussion. And if we cannot even approach that, what else can we approach?
Right.
So other things that are happening is, yes, we are an archipelago. That already makes it very complicated. But I think that, probably with new technologies, we might, mitigate to all of these things. But it is important that we present ourselves. Because and I think that, if also, places like the United States, Brazil, and all of these are, very important, nations, Mexico, they have to realize that we are part of the same system. Even the United States, which claim, looks at itself, as this very powerful nation, stuff like that, was a plantation, economy. One cannot get away from that. You understand? My last exhibit was, called Decolonizing Refinement. But it was, when I visited, they invited me in the north of Florida, and I said, okay, this must be completely out of, of the sphere of Haiti or anything. It must have nothing to do with my histories and stuff like that. What am I going to do? So as I was discussing this particular exhibit with them, they were inviting me, and I always want to discuss things before I do anything. I just asked the question, is there anything Haitian in Tallahassee? If you know where Tallahassee is, you would be quite surprised, that there would be anything. Well, hold and behold, there it was smack, center, because there is what they call the Bureau of Antiquities there, and there was one simple question, is there anything Haitian in your collections? And they said, let us think, and 5 minutes later they came back, come and see. I go down to their vaults, and there are roomfuls of, machinery, okay, wooden machinery from the early 18th century, right, that were used to, for sugar making. And I said, what are they doing here? Oh, they've been found everywhere around here. And I said, how come they've been found everywhere around here? And then the whole thing started, coalescing in my mind that, yes, we all know the story of after the Haitian Revolution, there was a massive exodus of not only whites but Creole plantation owners that fled to Cuba and fled to New Orleans, but nobody knows that they went elsewhere. And the history gets even more complicated in the fact that the Marquis of Lafayette of American Revolution, at the end of his life, was given, as a token of appreciation, they said, well, we'll manage, because they were apparently in Haiti, they were all big nobles and stuff like that. And they brought not only their slaves and stuff like that in Tallahassee, he just made a cross, over the land that they gave him, and put his finger and said, that's the capital of my property. And it was Tallahassee. So the city is built by the Marquis of Lafayette. He brings, his cronies from Saint-Domingue, up there. They try to make sugar, and they fail miserably because after, there's a point in at the level where it will grow here and it will not grow further up. Anyways, so one realizes that there's a whole discussion because, at the same time, when the formation of the United States, the discussion of slaves, was put on the table and was diverted because of characters like the Marquis of Lafayette, who says, well, maybe my people, we're going to do sugar, the United States is going to become very rich and blah, 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 blah. We're going to take over what Saint-Domingue was for France. And hence, we cannot be really discussing this slavery issue right now. Was diverted, of course. Cotton became, and that continued until the Civil War. So, when you start looking at this, by looking at all of these histories.
Erasure of narratives that have been there. The movement of many Caribbean people from North Florida, from St. Augustine, to the Caribbean when it changed from Spanish to
That's
English.
Another story. By knowing all these stories. Right. I think that, the separation of disciplines in the academia is also something that is very problematic. Mantia, we were talking afterwards, said that he was delighted to be here. This is an art organization dealing with the arts. And, he says, he's not an art, but I think he had more contributions to make here than anywhere else. Yes, he's an important literary figure and professor at NYU, but it is imperative. He says that he was delighted, and it informed him as much as probably.
You're going to have to use the microphone.
Yes.
Tú eres puertorriqueño, pero
yo me gustaba. He should have. He said that he was. More than happy to be. How would I say it? To be here because he learned as much, from all of presentations here and the context and everything, than just that. So I'm always urging everyone. I've been very blessed by being always asking academia to support my work in one way or another, and it has been very interesting, if not beneficial for me, of course, but he has opened minds, my mind and many others' mind, that's all types of stories. Yesterday I was talking about the Aponte thing. If somebody had not mentioned Ada Ferrer to me, who's a very important Cubanist. Now she's rewriting the whole history. Cuba as a, as a central, la más fiel de las colonias, suddenly, suddenly from that to, becoming, the one to start, a whole movement in the Americas. Probably following Haiti. Right. She's tying that whole revolution in Cuba with the Haitian Revolution and the position of, former colonies in the situation.
Right.
So, it's very interesting when you start looking at all of these things, and probably we'll learn more, on what stands to take and how we should approach these kind of problematics, in this 21st century. And I find it very interesting because it complicates the discourse. You understand? I think it's very important that, you know, like academia follows what's happening. I mean, in Miami, I mean, yes, we have, I mean, I was discussing with Tobias this morning again. I mean, every time I have to have somebody write, of course, he can. He is the specialist. La misma cuestión. Yes, que bien. Anyways, what about what you have to say about this situation? That I've taken the, you know, like taken over and spoken for hours. Tell us what you can tell.
About which situation?
Decolonization.
Decolonization. Well, there is no decolonization because we're not being allowed to decolonize. For me, Miami is an incredibly important space because it is multinational, transnational, and Caribbean. But it's occupied by a United States that refuses to acknowledge those incredibly long-standing histories of migration and nutrition, because we nourish that land. So there's this displacement that I see in Miami from all my years of coming there, that the really working class, the people who are creating art in the barrios, in what used to be, well, it's still the Sahuacera, but that area is really shifting, just like Little Haiti. And we have the similar problem in the Bahamas. Like, we're getting rid of anything that is vaguely local to put in a resort or to create communities that look a particular kind of way for a touristic ethos. I see that as an ongoing struggle in Miami. I don't know if you...
It is. I mean, I said earlier, I call Miami North Caribbean, you know, rather than south of the United States. I mean, the configuration, the social configuration of Miami, and yes, there is. It's a very young city, and from what I understand, I mean, the way it has evolved is very peculiar. I mean, it does not have, I mean, the heavy industry that characterizes major centers in the United States. It's, you know, like, I mean, I think from what I understand, it's based on, you know, like, first of all, real estate for X, Y, and Z, and also on, you know, like, tourism. And it has grown to be as such, and is much more, I mean, to me, Miami is much more, I mean, similar to the Caribbean and the way the Caribbean has been trying to reinvent itself. Miami has, you know, has done it much more successfully in many ways. But at the same time, I feel that, you know, like, they have a responsibility, I mean, to look at their history first of all, and that's like a whole thing to be done. I mean, Miami has to really understand what has happened to it. You know, and if it doesn't, I mean, it will miss a lot. And yes, there is a lot going on there. And I don't know about the displacement. Yes, it's like a what do you call that game kids play? You know, like rolling around the chairs. You know, like running around.
Musical
chairs.
Like,
so I mean, like, neighborhoods are like moving around like that, but somehow it's all moving, and they're pushing probably like in towards the Everglades more and more. So I think we'll have, you know, like, I mean, a whole new, what do you call, lacustre? How do you say that in English? March, you know, like neighborhoods on stilts, you know, like in the Everglades very soon, if that game continues, you know.
But I mean, that then represents a different type of problem, because in Puerto Rico we have the displacement that they're trying to gentrify that whole San Juan area, which is trying to get rid of the community in El Caño de Martin Peña, gentrify that, and just push everybody out. So I grew up, I mean, I lived in Old San Juan for many years. The Old San Juan I lived in has virtually disappeared because it's become gentrified, little hotels, little spaces that are way too expensive. So how do we, as practitioners of cultural narratives, of cultural performance, how do we save spaces? Because we get easily displaced, even though the reason this happens is because we pave the way in for so much of it.
Well, from what I gather, from what I can see, and what I mean, the saving grace, if there is any, in a place like Miami, is that the elders, let's call them, you know, I mean, whatever that means, the elders of Miami has realized. Who are they? The elders of Miami have decided that a part of their strategies as a cultural space was to use art as somehow of a common denominator. I mean, following probably the French, you know, like where culture and art is very important, and we have to make sure that the city becomes an international destination. Hence, we are endowed with like one of the nicest museums I've seen built in years anywhere on the planet. And also there is a cultural cultural affairs of Miami has been very, very influential in, you know, like, I mean, whatever monies there are for the arts to be, you know, like at least somehow democratically sprinkled, you know, like to all the communities in Miami.
So everybody's equally brought in.
And I've been, you know, like I've joined the foray of actors there, claiming that you know, like Miami will benefit by, you know, like creating its, you know, like identity by really becoming, you know, like, I mean, the epicenter not only of what it is, but also of the Caribbean, which is its closest, you know, like, I mean, and of course, you know, like in backyard neighbor, or, you know, like, I mean, to really take this very seriously and look at the Caribbean as, you know, like, I mean, and to make a name for itself from that angle. Because, I mean, you know, like, we're still considered in many, many ways, you know, like the third party, you know, like, I mean, the third wheel in as far as culture. I mean, at least it was thought of. So, things are changing, right? But I think Miami ought to create itself, you know, it's still a city in flux. I mean, to have that identity and have that particular focus, because, I mean, if it wants to, first of all, create collections, create, research, and that's where I ask also the university to join the bandwagon, you understand, to make sure that Miami becomes, you know, like the epicenter, not of Florida or the South, but to include, you know, like, I mean, a very, very vibrant and very peculiar and important world region, which is the Caribbean, which has, you know, like, which has a very peculiar history, you know, like, as part of its, you know, like, function, you know, like, that's what we are covering. Don't worry, the rest of the world, we are covering the Caribbean, and, you know, like, and do it factually and systematically. Because, I mean, at least as far as, you know, like, saving or helping out, maintain, you know, like, a vibrant culture in the whole region, I think it's the only place that can do it for the Caribbean. I mean, I thought at one point, you know, I mean, many people, or the Cubans thought they could do it through Havana. You know, like, Puerto Rico said, you know, like, okay, we are a financial, you know, like, I mean, epicenter, but, you know, like, all of this is in flux still, but Miami is still the one that has the most impact and the most possibility of impact in the region. So I really feel, and, you know, and I have to add that, you know, like the academia in Florida still, I mean, like, the ones that are looking at the Caribbean in a systematic fashion are not in Miami. I mean, yes, things are changing as far as universities, you know, like the University of Miami and FIU, but they are, I think they should do it systematically the same way that at least, you know, like the Perez is trying to do in the arts.
Right, but then that goes right back to the whole thing of being colonized from outside, because the money is usually given to institutions to come in and do research to tell us what we need, as opposed to these specialists being taken from within and empowered to do that. So how do we get rid of that recolonizing of the minds and the information and the knowledge?
Well, I mean, I can jump right ahead and say that places like Martinique and Guadeloupe, I mean, the French have you know, like some clout and some, I mean, at least with their institutions here. I mean, we are in one of the nicest museums, if not the nicest, in the Caribbean. Yeah. I mean, they've managed to endow themselves with such such facilities. I mean, I hope that the academia as well is involved, you know, in a certain way.
Yeah. But I think we need to look at how we bring people on, because I will say this about academia. Academia can be incredibly narrow-minded.
Well, they have to start getting, decolonized.
Even those two young ladies sitting right there, they may agree with me or they may not, because they want to throw books at me. But
yeah, I'm sure they. I'm gonna get shot right after I get out of this place.
but again, it goes right back to the beginning. It is about money, where you get the funding and who controls the funding, and that is always a problem, especially in academia, because if we can't get the funding, then we have no program.
It's a complicated. Yes, I understand. Yes, it's all intertwined, and it's all intertwined. And I'm not here to be telling people what to do and what not to do. I'm just looking at the situation, and I think that it's it's a crucial one. I think that organization like Tilting Axis is trying to shine a light on this particular issue. I think the artists from the region are, you know, like at loss sometimes. I mean, I did my part, you know, like they launched this program. They launched this program, Caraïbes en Création, and I did jump on the French and said, listen, you're doing something for the region. I mean, which was great, and it had a lot of importance. And I said, but you cannot not avoid having, you know, like these artists, especially from the French Antilles and the French department, you know, like come to Miami. I mean, because I mean the usual how would I say it, curses for artists of the region is to fly into Paris. You know, like their nearest metropole was Paris. I mean, I've been trying very hard to tell them, you know, like, okay, they can go to Paris. Yes, they should go to Paris, but make it via Miami. You know, I mean, like, make sure they pass by and make sure that they can try and be part of the conversation that is happening in Miami and with the rest of the region, because even at the geographical and the way the airplanes are moving around the area, Miami seems to be the hub. So, you know, like, let's really, I mean, I'm pushing it for it to be the real hub of the region and make sure that we can see each other there more often than not.
The problem, I'm going to challenge you on that one in a way that, because it then goes right back to colonizing the central power in a position that does not allow the Caribbean to develop. Because for me to get to Puerto Rico, I have to go to Miami. For me to get to Jamaica, I have to go to Miami. So how do we continue to create bridges but not allow a dominant power to...
I'm being pushed against the wall here. I mean, it seems that there has been this tendency in the Caribbean to look at our northern neighbor, you know, like as the wolf, in that we are in the, you know, like mouth of the wolf. Fine, all of this is fine and dandy. What I'm trying to tell you is that they are not that different from us. The United States, and they are you know, like they were, and up to many parts of the United States, especially the southern part, is still a colonial, you know, like, I mean, we are in a colonial situation. And if we don't I mean, if the United States does not really assess and accept this and see how they can, you know, like, they can find ways, you know, like to reassess that kind of position that they've had, it's going to be very difficult. Yes, it's going to be very complicated. There are other powers in the South, you know, like in the South, you know, like such as Brazil, such as others, you know, I mean, they have, you know, I mean, they are doing their part. They're still very far. But, I mean, at least we're speaking of the Caribbean, and to even think that we are, by me asking the French government via the Caribbean a Caribbean program, to invest in the United States, to promote artists there, I mean, that was, like, I had to do it. They said, but why? I mean, their first question, why should we spend a cent in the United States? I said, because it's part, it's part of a strategy where, you are doing a project to support the Caribbean artists. I'm telling you that it would be beneficial to them to be in the United States, in Miami. I'm not saying New York or anything else, in Miami. And that would reinforce, they had to agree that I made sense.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, it's not a question, that we are, that we are, supporting, the aggressors or the domineering, the United States. It's a city that has a very interesting rapport to itself, to its region, and it's a young city, very open-minded, because that's the only way they can be. You understand, to survive in this 20, they don't have major industry. They have to be at the point where they are an open city. And when it came to, recently to this immigration issue, Miami stated immediately that it was an open city, because they could not start playing the game that is happening in Washington. And they know that pertinently. You understand? So politically, culturally, at so many levels, I mean, it might be the saving grace of of all of us here, because at least there is a proximity.
Right.
It has a lot of facilities, has some sort of commercial cloud or money cloud or financial cloud. Let's be part of let's make it an intelligent move around. Yes, no, the United States does not like the idea of investing anywhere, but in its own infrastructure. So yes, they will. They have been. There's been backlash against me. There's been backlash made against many institutions about being this overarching kind of trying to play cultural agents for regions and stuff like that. But they know that to make themselves interesting, they have to reinforce themselves to become regional, or at least to place themselves. And the Caribbean, it's like their area of playing. Of what they should be doing. And I firmly believe so. So if you don't like the idea of being under the thumb of the colonial power, which is as colonized as anybody else, so we have to think about that very carefully, Anyway.
Think about the colonial power, or think about the doctrine that continues to espouse that. Because I think, again, when you look at artistic production, cultural production, you're looking at the ways that funding is distributed. And I really want you to speak to not so much the big picture, but how do we get into those smaller communities and really empower the artists, the music makers, the public programs, to bring people into the conversation? Because that's key if we're going to talk about decolonizing. You sound like you're doing that in Little Haiti. So I know in the Bahamas, there's always a barrier to an institution, especially when it comes to class and race. So how do we get beyond those racial, class-based, gender-based barriers and kind of make it more equitable? Sorry, that's a rough question.
That's a rough question. You should start telling me what you've done in Puerto Rico or elsewhere.
Well, that's the thing. I work with a lot of young people to try and get them to see how deeply colonized their spaces are. To see that as much as they've talked about independence, the independence that we have is way more dependent now and way more obfuscated by the fact that people don't speak to each other. So the barriers are there, we just don't see them because we don't cross them. So working in the university, working with young performance artists, working with young community-based people, it's trying to get them to understand that we have to really be conscious of how government works to control and basically to disempower.
Again, coming back to academia, there is, coming back to academia, I mean, governments are people, okay? And if they are misinformed and, or not, in tune with their histories and their connections and things like that, I mean, they were really literally shocked in the north of Florida to realize that, there was, these connections with this little place called Haiti. And, the same day my opening was happening, at the same time, across the street, there's a cemetery where they were planting Confederate flags on the thing. So it's a complicated situation.
Agreed.
Yes. The south of the United States, the United States. But, as much as we need to understand, I was telling my, young Dominican yesterday, there's a book that just came out that I read, and it's like fascinating. It's called We Dream Together. And it's the history. It was published last year, and it's by Ann Heller. Everybody should read that book because it shows. The Dominicans, think that Haiti has like this history of aggression toward them. That they think that it's one island and stuff like that. It's one people, black, and they had to be free, and that's all it was.
Right.
Nothing else. And by recounting that by really putting even for me, I'm always try to be as open-minded as I can. I didn't realize the complication of that whole history and what the enmeshed interests were. And basically, all Haiti wanted to do with the Dominican Republic was to make sure that the blacks that were there were free. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. So academia has there's a lot of stories to come that have to come out to make people realize the connections. I was quite surprised to go to Trinidad one time and spoke my Creole, the whole time I was there, and very good Haitian Creole. It wasn't Haitian; it was just French Creole. The one we could understand each other. Here, the same thing. We have a whole history together. You understand? What did they say? Ces messieurs de la Martinique, ces gens de la Martinique, ces messieurs de la Guadeloupe, et ces seigneurs de Saint-Domingue. So that's, there's a whole history there, in one saying. You understand? How they intertwine, how our histories are. And, it's you have Cuba. And suddenly, I find that there are reactions in Cuba to the Haitian Revolution with the slaves there. All of these histories, just reinforce the fact that we have a similar history. We have, a very, complicated things, and basically to remind all of us, from the north, from Canada all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, that we were like colonies at one point.
But again, I don't think it's just academia or academic learning. It's about how we express ourselves. I think once you start to move outside of national spaces, you actually get to understand that there is a whole plethora of similarities that are all entrenched in our uniqueness, because we have this really shared history. So when you go to the southern Bahamas, people would go back and forth between the southern Bahamas and Haiti all the time. If you're in Inagua, the families are Duvaliers, and they would leave and go to Haiti. But there was nothing stopping them. Now, there is this magical veil that has been pulled down, and Haitians are this other that cannot be trusted, because we have spun off that 18th century discourse of, violent upheaval, that freedom. Again, so that is not addressed because it does not empower a discourse that continues to other spaces like Haiti. And I know that Miami's not doing that, but there is a real powerful agenda to continue to create fragmentation within the Caribbean. I apologize if I'm offending anybody, but I'm going to speak it as it is. When American businessmen come to the Bahamas, they come in the hope of creating microcosms of gated communities in South Florida. So that is something that if we are not careful, it displaces many of us in a vortex that doesn't allow any kind of expression because nobody knows what's going on. And because we're not speaking to each other, we're not seeing it, we're not hearing it. So that's the kind of decolonial emphasis, I guess, I'm trying to focus. And it's the dismissal of voices from those margins, like Donald Trump's ridiculous behavior with Puerto Rico. I find that really, reprehensible.
Yeah.
But he's been allowed to get away with it. You know, how do we
circumvent that?
How do we do that?
By being activists, by opening our, by speaking loudly and making sure that art is produced without imperatives of that type.
Right. Right.
And foster that. And I think that wherever the institutions might be, whether it is here, whether it's elsewhere in the Caribbean, or elsewhere anywhere in the planet, let's try to divert this little conversation because I don't have an answer to it.
But that's just the discussion. The thing is, the discussion is really good. That's because it starts other ideas flowing. And you talked about the Monroe Doctrine. We live in a different Monroe Doctrine. But
Yes.
your work speaks volumes about what is actually happening on the ground. Like just the image that's behind us, the middle image, really speaks about what's going on today in the Caribbean, even though we may not see it. Because there's movement of people constantly. You know, every day there are Haitians and Cubans being picked up.
Oh, yes.
But that story is not often being told. In South Florida, it may be. But in other places, because we're so fragmented, the narrative is easily lost. So I think the work that you're doing is incredibly powerful for giving that story. So how do we get that to move de una manera mucho más profunda, mucho más
Es muy complicado. Es
Sí.
muy complicado. I mean, what I say is that I find that art, artists from the region have to be very engaged in this kind of discussions, in that kind of, and they are. I'm not saying that they are. Many of them, very powerfully. And support each other. I'm in a position. I was just saying that of course, I'm a diaspora, and there is a mistrust of diasporas. Because we are not authentic anymore, because we've left. The region. So that I was just mentioning that because I'm a diasporic element.
The mic.
A diasporic element, I cannot be trusted anymore. But, and that I'm in a privileged position. I feel like many of us are here. I can see faces here. We are trying our best to make sure that voices from the region are heard, at least abroad, because again, many of them cannot even present themselves in certain areas. Thinking of Haiti many times, even today, we've gained a lot in Haiti as far as democratic power and stuff like that, but it's so haphazard and it's so difficult anyways that, some artists can be silenced very quickly.
Right.
Let's not talk of Cuba, let's
Right.
not talk of other places.
Yeah.
You understand? And the precarity of the economies here also precludes for these artists, to be as vocal and because they have to mind themselves, and mind their backs. It's a very complicated situation in so many ways.
Which takes us right back to the thing of funding, because a lot of times you're defunded because you speak out.
Right.
And that or you're not exhibited because you're too radical, as Carlos was talking about. How do we then create the safety to be able to express without being penalized or punished? Because, a lot of the Anglophone Caribbean tends to be very punitive still. because of that slavery mentality that has not ended. It's still this super colonial kind of structure. But one of the images that I really liked and I found incredibly transnational is that the whole Baron Samedi image that you had there earlier, and the nuances that were in that. But how do we allow, encourage, facilitate speaking through art, through public art projects, for example?
By just
by being
here. By being.
And this is one of the benefits of having like a tilting axis. So how do we bring more people together? I guess that's another.
Well, I mean, we have to make use of all technologies available to us. I mean, whether, like in the most, like, I mean, and really paying attention and looking at how things are developing. I mean, helping the discourse between academia and other fields, and making sure that our aim is not only to the public or to the artists, but should it be to the responsible entities in the government as well, because they're just people. They need to be informed, just like artists should be informed, just like academics should be informed. I mean, it's very important to to speak to to the powers to be. You understand? Because they're just people, and I've realized that when you talk, and you make sure that they understand, sometimes, it helps a lot, because they do have the reins of the whatever little purse they might have. So, when you speak to them and they get it, I mean, they might be more, enticed or see the benefits of spending monies in ways that, might be more fruitful to them. It's a complicated situation.
It is. It's like when sometimes I write and it gets published in the paper, and people get all upset because I've said something that steps on toes.
Well, we step on toes, but I mean, and also making sure that to realize that these islands are, I find many, not at levels like this, but when I get out into the streets and stuff like that, and everywhere I go in the Caribbean, even places like Haiti, they're insular visions. Their insular visions, really reinforces whatever prejudice they might have against whatever they, it's like this infighting, this isolationist, visions of things. A place like Cuba, has you go there and you speak to the people there, not to the artists, not to the, but and they have preconceived ideas about everything, and they are very vocal about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, okay, go and read a book. Anyways, but it's everywhere like that. Yeah. It's everywhere like that.
But thank you for.
I was supposed to be here for just and now I've been I hope I didn't burn myself and burn any bridges. I didn't mean to. God. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have a.
Hello, gentlemen.
I think that's that wicked individual up in the back.
I want
right?
to see faces.
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
hi. I know you both. How are you? It's Jason. Hi. Lumiere, s'il vous plaît. Did I say it right? Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last few days is, we've been talking about bringing artists into these spaces, artists who may not, you just touched on this, artists who may not receive these grants, who may not receive opportunities to be seen, but how do we bring the audiences in? You know, like so often it is told to us that, well, you know, these become insular spaces. And I think part of this decolonialization process has to be, you know, making it something for everyone. And often we're made to feel as if, well, everybody's not interested. But in my experience and in my work, I have found that that is not true. And I'm wondering if you could talk, Edward, to that, about the challenges and opportunities that you have witnessed over the years operating in a space like Little Haiti that has gone through so many changes, is going through so many changes. And we're talking about a community that has rah-rah street parades, you know, like every other Friday, you know, these kinds of things. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Little Haiti neighborhood is quite fascinating. And, but for some reason, the cathedral excuse me, Notre Dame, yes, the Notre Dame Cathedral, you know, like set itself up like that, and then and also the Center for immigrations, I mean, for the refugee center of Little Haiti, I mean, were very crucial in guiding and hosting new arrivals, however they came, by boat, you know, like by air, whatever. So, you know, like, I mean, the city even came to the point to acknowledge the neighborhood as, you know, like, I mean, the Little Haiti. I mean, of course, the population grew in numbers, and, you know, like, politicians were formed within the states, and gained power because we are in a democracy, and exercise, you know, like, I mean, their clout and their political acumen to the point of we have a neighborhood right now. At the same time, all of this is accomplished, the neighborhood is decomposing itself because, you know, like, the Haitians don't want to be affiliated with that particular neighborhood once they gain certain affluency in the United States. They just move out. So, you know, like, it has been existing, that neighborhood, with, you know, like, new arrivals all the time, and up till now, those poles within Little Haiti have maintained, because they could have changed the name, and they can change the name any time at this point. But in the process, you know, like, the city elders, I have to call them that all the time because I don't know who they are. The city elders, I found it very interesting to endow that neighborhood with a cultural center. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, I had bought my studio because I came from Paris to Miami because there was a Little Haiti. And I bought that particular building because I could see the Haitian market from my backyard. So, I mean, to me, it was like this whole emotional thing of being in Little Haiti, that the only place outside of Haiti called Haiti somehow. And there's none, you know, like today that are called, you know, like, I mean, anywhere, not even in New York or in Montreal. So, to me, it was very important to be there. And also, when I lived in Paris, it was, you know, like, I mean, my life there was very complicated by being so factually Haitian, in the sense that, you know, like, they only called on me when they were having something on the Caribbean or in Haiti. Oh, let's not forget our little friend here from Haiti. And they would, like, slot me into a particular show here and there. At one point I said, enough of that. I'm going to a place where I can make my own little setups, you know? So it was very interesting for me to not only come to Miami, but to be in Little Haiti. And I've been there for what now, 22 years, and I've seen it evolve. It's changing very much, but at the same time, the Haitians are getting more and more political clout, and we have very sympathetic friends. Like I joined when I first got to Miami, this place called the South Florida Art Center. It's a collective of artists there, and I joined, and I spent a long time there. And they helped me very much, and I've always been I'm totally in debt to them for making my arrival to Miami as smooth as it was. I joined that organization very quickly. They informed me of all opportunities that were to be had in Miami, and I got them one after the other. I got them. So I've been very lucky in my life. So, anyways, that South Florida Art Center was there, and now apparently, well, it's not apparently anymore. They've just, invested. They had to leave, or they made a killing. But delighted that they are there because it's a major organization, a very old and very established artist organization in Miami, and they are always done good things and probably will do better things. And the fact that they are in Little Haiti and claiming grounds there, will help, that neighborhood maintain its integrity in some way. I hope, in some way or another. So I am in Little Haiti. They built this center right around me. My building is here, and they've built this cultural center, and I had a big row with the city to stay there. And in the process, as they built this facility around me, I was put in a position that I had to take care of the center for a few years. Now the center has, has become very important and is very active. It has a beautiful gallery in it. So we've been using it on a yearly basis to mount that project, which I've mentioned here and there, called the Global Caribbean. And as I said earlier, that program is to promote Caribbean artists and create specialized exhibits or present part of the region. We had something done on the bigger islands, the larger islands. We had something done on the French island. I think it's time for that program to launch something about the British Caribbean. And create something of the sort. And we've even expanded the program to call it the Borderless Caribbean, i.e. to include anything that touches that sea. So for the south of the United States, all the countries around the Caribbean basins are to be included in that program. I'm glad that also come is in the fray a program that was installed by the French region, the Caribbean French region, called the Tout Monde, which is also held partially, and I really want it to become more important, to be held at the Little Haiti Cultural Center. Anyways, it's a facility that's there. Miami, I said, is in a very interesting position. Major institutions like the Perez and others have always looked at the Caribbean. The universities,
So, Edward.
the universities, have followed, but I wish they would be more proactive. We've had arriving to Miami a major scholar, which is from the Bahamas, Erica James, who's has just started her work there. And hopefully, that will add to the fray of the whole thing.
So we have more
that
questions.
right?
A few more questions.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Zelk. I'm a culture attaché at the French Embassy of the Cultural Services in Miami. And so I'm really happy to jump in here. I think this is very interesting, and I'm probably going on a slippery ground here. And without playing with words, I'm going on un sol glissant. Because I heard the discussion, and I think that we have to decolonize the relation that exists between institutions and structures. Without the human beings that are inside, we're not going to make it. I don't think that decolonization is possible if we do not involve the institutions and the government structures themselves. We're not making it. And so it's been very interesting here to hear the discussions. We have heard a lot about decolonization from artists, curators, art critiques, and everyone. But there was no voice from the institutions, at least state institutions. And I don't think that we're going to make it, because certainly there's a lot of resisting forces and we're not there yet. But this is exactly what we're trying to do from within. This is a role, there's some other few government representatives. We're not many, but there are a few, and this is why we are here, because we want to contribute to that. And there's things, forces that we need to do from within and jointly with artists. And indeed, so Edouard mentioned the Toumon Festival in Miami, so we've been working on this and trying to indeed not only invite artists from Paris, but from the region, having them stop in Miami, and then also opening up to other Caribbean artists and institutions. So it's a kind of, we're partnering with the Paris Museum, with the ICA, and many others, and the Little Haiti Culture Center. And indeed, what was happening the first year when we had this, we indeed could feel that the community was very reluctant, very hesitant, and very, suspicious. This was like this is a French initiative, so it's a colonial initiative, so we could feel it the first year. But the second year, we were building up things with more partners, etc. It started opening up, so we were starting to decolonize this relation and opening up. And I think it's something that we all need to be involved in, and it takes time, but we have to be all in the same boat. Otherwise, I don't think we're gonna make it.
Can I comment on that?
Okay.
I like that comment. I am a member of the institution, and unfortunately the institution structurally is a problem. The individuals within the institution are the ones that make the change, because the institution, my institution, which is the university, is not interested in really decolonizing its structure. So we are pushing, but we're also receiving pushback. I mean, believe me when I say that we work every day to undo those structures and to reach out to the community. So it's not even just reaching out, it's bringing the community into that structure. And then we get the pushback from the university because, oh, we don't have funding for that. So we go out and we pay for these things ourselves. That's why I say that, yes, the government is made up of people, but it is also in the Bahamas, and I really put it in the Bahamas, made up of a very old colonial structure that has never changed. And I apologize if I offend anybody, but I am speaking the truth, because the system never became decolonial. It became post-colonial, but it never lost its colonial empowerment.
I will try to say it in English. I agree totally with what you just said. Decolonizing is, we have to change the things. We have to change things. As an artist, it's easy to me. I just have to change my practice. Draw with the left hand. Try to think another way. Try to believe someone saying something that seems wrong to me. And so we all have to take risks. Artists living in Guadeloupe, you don't make art if you don't take risks of just fall in 6 months, just be without any money and fall. So you have to take the risk to to unplease your community, because community colonization make classification, and this classification maybe Caribbean artists cannot fit in these classifications, because each island has many particular stories. Each artist has his own story. So it's a big work, but in sculpture I have to change the way and be surprised by my own work. So maybe it's something we can do.
Yeah, that was absolutely, taking risks. I think that's what it's about. And my name's Marie. I work in Miami at the Perez Art Museum, and I also work with Edouard at the Little Haiti Cultural Center as a curator. It also starts with us. We all represent either ourselves as artists or institutions, and we have to take risks, like you said. And we also have to know what our values are, and if we don't know what those values are, we need to dig deep, and we need to recognize our privilege. All of us here are privileged in some way. So how are you going to use your privilege to change things? Because that is risky, hella risky. So that, if you're not taking any risks, if you're not exercising your privilege within an institution and living to the edge of what you can push your institution to do, push yourself as an artist, then you need to ask yourself, what is really your position? right? We don't come here to be fancy and to sit here for 3 days talking and talking. You have to have some action behind what you have experienced for the last 3 days.
Can I say one thing? But you have to be strategic too, you know, and you know you have to and strategy is really important, and one has to think about strategy as not binary. No, it's not inside outside. It's like, how do you create situations where like an institution in the US has to fund what you're doing in order to get what they need to do what they're doing. You know what I mean? Right. You have to create these systems where it's implied, you know, that, and there's no way that they'll get what they want if they don't do what you want, you know, and you know, or that kind of thinking needs to, and you have to and look for new models, you know, because the old models do perpetuate themselves very easily, but I think that's where the creativity needs to be placed in strategy.
I have 2 points. One is actually just really thinking, if we really would think about this whole term decolonization, what does that really mean? And I wonder to some extent how we oftentimes think about or if we're talking about decolonization as inclusion. Right? Does it mean, okay, we're going to, as an institution, have more artists of color or have more, you know, Latino artists or Haitian artists or queer artists, you know, whatever. And by including them in the exhibitions or in programming, if that in a way we've decolonized the institution. You know, one of the issues of decolonization is definitely the idea of strategy, but it's also about giving up power. It's giving up power. And until we understand that that power has to be redistributed, or we have to understand the power that we have, and not many institutions do that. Not many institutions want to do that. Not many people want to do that. So to decolonize it's vulnerable, it's risky, and it is scary, hella scary. Second part I wanted to make is, you know, we're talking about decolonization and it's great, but I wonder to some extent if we're kind of mirroring it out there, right? So the institutions in the United States need to decolonize. Institutions in Europe need to decolonize. But then I started thinking about, like, you know, what's going on in Bahamas with Haitians? Right. What's going on in Bahamas with the DR? What's going on with Haitians in the DR? What's going on with Haitians in Guadeloupe? I mean, how are we decolonizing in this space as in the Caribbean? We need to look inside ourselves before we can ask, you know, New York or Miami or France or Spain to clean up itself. You know, this needs to also happen up in here. And I think that that's one of, again, it's a vulnerable, scary, a process of giving up power. And that power sometimes it's economic, but it's also about privilege. It's also about class. And that's scary.
Okay, I have since we're in the polemic part of the event, mine's more of a comment. Sorry, gentlemen, you're like we're talking only to you. But I have to say, one of the things about the idea about decolonizing institutions is I think the way institutions function, they co-opt, meaning like you have to show. One of the things about the event in the conference that really excited me. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. One of the things I was excited about with this conference was hearing examples. And like in the case of the Victoria organization and changing the board, those little things actually have huge impacts. And the reality is the projects don't have to be large. And I think everyone always thinks of big projects, big institutions. But the reality is the small things are what ends up impacting institutions because those things catch fire. And I think that so sometimes the idea of an institution being decolonized, it has to come in a different way than I think sometimes we imagine them.
Sur la question qui a été évoquée de la décolonisation, comment le faire, par quels outils, je m'interroge aussi sur les mécanismes qui traversent la pensée, notamment à travers la langue, à travers l'hégémonie même de la langue. Parlant d'institutions, je suis responsable ici de programmation. Je pense qu'il y a une façon aussi de... il y a quelque chose qu'on dit dans le créole ici, « rumouner », ça veut dire redevenir quelqu'un. et comment on peut mot-phraser les choses, c'est-à-dire transformer, en qui gens nous qu'a chalvirer langue là, en qui gens nous qu'a penser nous, en qui gens nous qu'a wouchouké nous aussi dans l'histoire en nous, en qui gens créole là sont qu'a rend nous l'autre gens, en qui gens nous qu'a imaginer et en qui gens nous qu'a garder en l'autre manière, en qui gens nous qu'a garder à partir de d'où on est, comment on réécrit l'histoire d'un point de vue ancré. Et je pense que c'est ça aussi à travers l'institution. Et dans les rendez-vous que nous avons mis en place ici dans la programmation, quand on dit de rendre accessible à l'autre, il y a un rendez-vous régulier qu'on fait, quelles que soient les thématiques qui sont traversées, qu'elles soient scientifiques, politiques, enfin, on ne parle pas trop de politique, mais anthropologiques, c'est le beau cantage. C'est-à-dire comment aussi on parle au cœur de ceux qui font le pays. Et quand on parle de décolonisation, il y a quelque chose à inventer aussi dans les langages, finalement.
Okay, hi. My name is Jessie. I also work in an institution in the Netherlands. I know that in the Netherlands, many institutions have been forced by the government to be more inclusive and diverse and to decolonize their institution, otherwise they would lose their funding, indeed. So what the institutions do, and then I speak of white institutions, of course, they try to get a foreign artist inside of the institution, they have an exhibition, and then that's it, because then they keep their funding, so it's like a check, we did it. But in the end, they really don't want to decolonize. And I think that for us artists, and if we want to speak about decolonization and what decolonization is and what it means, I think that it means that we have to like reclaim power as well. And I think for artists, it is important to keep that power and also being able to say no to institutions in order to look at the big picture, that if institutions don't have the foreign artists, they will lose their funding. So if all foreign artists and artists with decolonized history say no to institutions, they will lose their funding, and then you can reclaim the decolonized process for yourself instead of the institutions that are taking over the whole process of decolonization. So I was actually thinking, that's the question actually, for artists, like maybe Edward, you can answer that. Should artists have like a sort of criteria to work with institutions and not to be like being part of this process and being displayed as a token that they are decolonizing?
Yeah, well, yes, there is that issue of the token black in the United States. Yeah, everybody has to be very vigilant as to their position, as to their what they intend to do with their art to start with. And as long as their art is true to themselves, I think that's the solution. That's one thing, I mean, I forgot to say, Florence left me with the express condition that, you know, I mean, that she was leaving. And she wanted me to say that finally the artists have to be very true to themselves and understand what they're doing and really demand and exiger, I mean, to demand that, you know, like to be that when their art is being presented and when they're presenting it, it's done in the way that they had intended it to be. All these discussions, she says as well, that have been going on since, you know, like decolonization. I mean, since probably, you know, like since, I mean, centuries. You know, I mean, like, I mean, from the Asian Revolution till today, a lot of actions have happened. A lot of countries have become, you know, like, I mean, involved and engaged in this thing. Many movements have, you know, but really, it's truly, in the end, the artist and their integrity that is involved here. And as long as they continue doing their work, you know, like the way they're supposed to do, or, you know, like the way they feel they should be doing it, I think that, you know, like there is space, and that's what it's all about in the end. But yes, we should not be used or be tokens of anything. So I don't know what else to say about it. I know that, like it is, I mean, in the art world, things go by fashion, and sometimes, things go, like, okay, there's a new movement, there's a new fashion, I mean, there's new this, new that. Novelty is a big thing. But at the same time, like any institution or any artist, I feel that, I will be vindicated at one point. Because, if their work was, like there and true to themselves, I mean, they will be vindicated at one point. So sometimes it's hard. It's a harsh life for some of them. And, but it's the path that we've all taken. I mean, I praise whomever, like sells for millions and zillions, And but the same way, I'm even more happy when I see, like a retrospective about somebody that was overlooked for decades. I'm just as happy, when I see that.
Burdens a lot of people in institutions to do all of the work of representing their whole community, culture, race, and the amount of stress that causes, especially in academia, in the United States of America, my word. Anyway,
all right.
Just going back to all of the key words that went across the auditorium: polemical, risk, vulnerability, privilege. This makes me think about the reason. What is the root reason why we make art? But what is the root reason why we write about art? What are we doing in art criticism? Who are we writing for? That is such a crucial question in the institution when we're operating from an institution or writing through institutions, that I unpack a lot, or we unpack a lot in the Black Embodiment Studio Art Writing Residency at the University of Washington, where we're thinking about ways of decolonizing academic writing as one small personal way, as a writer, as an art criticism writer, to change how accessible our criticism is, and who we're being read by, and how well we're being understood, and how we're serving artists, and how we're serving work and potential movements for our communities, on behalf of our communities. Because one of the institutional things that happens is we end up writing academically, and only 200 people can read it, and nobody else understands what the hell we're talking about.
There is that as well.
Right? So that's like thinking about how can we personally embody decolonization or decolonial work. The other way that I think about a lot in my own personal artwork is addressing classism and the way we cling in the Caribbean and also in West African countries. We cling to the gentry and we cling to aristocracy, and our aspirations go towards this idea of success that has been defined by capitalism, defined by colonialism, to be able to oppress someone else. When I have enough money, I'm going to get someone to clean my house. I don't know anything about her life. She can leave her children to take care of mine. That kind of thing that we need to be very conscious of. How are we participating in these class structures that make us feel that we've made it, so that we can come to our conferences and talk about this and then go back to our homes where that has been cleaned by somebody who doesn't have any visibility. I wanted to just put that into the space as something to think on a personal level, because as you were saying, Harak, that is what ripples out fractally through the institution and changes them.
I'm just going to step in. I'm old enough to have a kind of interesting experience. I'm here.
Yes.
Just here.
Hi, Joel.
Yeah, that's me. I'm old enough to have an interesting experience when talking about the institution, because it used to be the time, sorry, I'm going to turn 50, by the way, next year, so I'm just telling you that, just to give you an idea. I used to have exhibition by curators who were fully French many years ago, and I have to say, and that would give me the opportunity to thank you for it, Edward, that you were the first non-European curator who curated my work back in 10 years ago, 2009, with the first edition of
goodness.
Global Caribbean.
Oh, Lord.
So I want you to be aware of that. Because when we mention the institutions and the work that has to be done by us, etc., that gives you an idea, at least when it comes to the French girl only, from London, where I've been staying for 15 years. Therefore, all these discourses, you know, it's old, it's got at least 30 years in London. So I just want to mention that because I don't think you realize it, that for Jean-François Bouclé and all the rest of it, this is what you represented with your Global Caribbean platform. Therefore, I think, thanks to it, the institution, the French institution, started to change on the radical term, not just because there's been LKP, but you know, all sort of. So, yeah, I totally agree, Vanessa, that you know it has to be done from within. But is the institution ready to change? That's another issue. So I'm going to give you an example tomorrow for those of you who are going to come to the visit of L'Art of Decolonizing anything. My own strategy as an artist, and I really want to put it as an artist, was just to do things because we were lacking visibility, full stop. Okay? But then later on the discourse started to change because I realized that we were actually building a real power, and I will give you some example tomorrow.
Can I just make one comment to
Oui.
two things? You were talking about the Haitians in the Bahamas. Believe me, a lot of the stuff we do does not travel. So we sat down and organized something called Conversations on Statelessness, because it is effectively race, ethnic, class-based, that a lot of the people who are stateless in the Bahamas happen to be Haitian, or descended from Haitians, and it doesn't have to be their parent, but it could be their grandparent. So we did that when I was dean. The institution then effectively blocked the funding for that because it was not something they valued. So we continued to have that. We then partnered with the UNHCR and created another channel to be able to have these discussions because that's what we can do. Now, bringing people into that room is the challenge because they still feel stigmatized by this official space, so to speak. How we get over that, I'm not sure, but we're still working on it. We had another full-day workshop last month. The other thing that we try to do, again, with the university and the whole gender, class, race thing is to look at the way, and this is not the institution, this is the individuals, to look at the way women are completely disempowered as compared to men, even though mostly women run the institution. So single women do not get the same benefits as married women. And a woman who is single, who starts a job and her house is paid for, when she gets married, she loses that benefit because it is expected that she will move in to her husband's house. The patriarchy, the joys of it. But the man never loses the benefit if he has that benefit. So it is demystifying these discriminatory processes that obfuscate the road to equity or any kind of equality that is really about doing the work artistic, creative, academic, and just being able to talk about it. And I will say one thing. When you start to talk about these things, the barriers that the young people put up are real and really ferocious sometimes, because you are challenging all that they know. Or I am challenging all that they know. And that is a problem because they understand that women should be paid less. They understand that women should not have the same rights as men. And, oh, it's a battle. But it's not a battle that I shy away from.
Great. So this is, I think, going to be our last question. And then are we breaking, or are we? We're going to go right on to the. Okay.
Oui.
C'est juste pour intervenir par rapport à ce que la présidente de l'Artocarp disait tout à l'heure à propos de la décolonisation dans les institutions, par les institutions et au sein des institutions. Je vais prendre l'exemple de la Guadeloupe et de la Martinique, où nous avons eu pendant plusieurs années, et nous avons entendu l'intervention de Madame Lozère qui nous a rappelé le travail qu'elle a réalisé sur les expositions coloniales, depuis le 19e siècle jusqu'au début du 20e siècle. Nous avons vu qu'il y a eu des artistes qui véritablement se prenaient en main pour créer des associations, pour justement organiser le travail, le métier d'artiste, notamment en Guadeloupe et en Martinique. Nous avons vu également, à travers ce qu'elle nous disait, qu'il y a eu aux artistes, pour leur permettre de travailler, en même temps pour leur permettre de rendre visible leur travail. Il y a eu quelques artistes parmi eux qu'elle a déjà donc eu l'occasion d'inventorier. Et moi, je viens intervenir pour dire qu'en fait, les institutions, le mot n'est peut-être pas approprié, mais pour dire qu'en France, il y a vraiment eu au niveau de la politique culturelle, et j'ai dans la salle une collègue qui pourrait affirmer cela, qui a eu un grand bond en avant dans les territoires français d'outre-mer, autour de l'art, notamment depuis la décentralisation, les mouvements de décentralisation, qui ont, depuis les années 1980, notamment 82-83, qui ont permis justement aux territoires de véritablement prendre en main les expressions artistiques sur leur territoire. En faisant quoi? Nous avons ici la possibilité pour les départements ou les régions, puisque ce sont des compétences, la compétence culture est une compétences partagées, c'est-à-dire l'État, les collectivités territoriales, que sont les communes, les départements, les régions, peuvent intervenir, c'est-à-dire... Et nous avons ici, avec ce mouvement de la décentralisation et surtout de la déconcentration aussi des moyens de l'État, la possibilité sur le territoire de décider de la politique culturelle à mettre en place. Et si je prends l'exemple de la Guadeloupe, nous voyons qu'au niveau du département des collectivités, une collectivité comme la ville de Pointe-à-Pitre a une collection importante. Pourquoi? Parce qu'elle met en place des moyens pour acquérir des œuvres d'art, des artistes. Idem pour le département, idem pour la région, qui ont des collections importantes. Si avant l'État donnait justement des prix aux artistes qu'il estimait capables de répondre à ces attentes, mais aujourd'hui, sur le territoire, les artistes ont la possibilité justement d'accéder à ces moyens pour créer et pour valoriser leurs expressions. La difficulté, effectivement, c'est qu'il manque encore très peu d'espace. L'autre difficulté également, c'est que il faut monter des dossiers pour répondre aux critères qui permettent d'accéder aux subventions. En revanche, en matière de création, il n'y a pas d'ordre à donner. Chaque artiste travaille en fonction de ce qu'il souhaite présenter. Donc, c'est ainsi que nous avons des artistes, quels que soient les horizons, qui abordent les thématiques qui, autrefois, pouvaient paraître difficiles à aborder, comme la thématique de l'esclavage, mais aujourd'hui, nous en avons qui, véritablement, se sont appropriés ces thématiques et les présentent sur le territoire, aussi bien dans la Caraïbe qu'en Europe et partout dans le monde. Ce que je pourrais dire aussi, c'est que il y a sur le territoire, sur ces deux territoires, il y a des artistes, et Joël Ferly l'a rappelé pour l'Artocarp, des artistes qui se mobilisent. Ils n'attendent pas que l'État vienne dire faites ceci ou faites cela. Ils se mobilisent pour créer justement, pour développer ce mouvement sur le territoire. Mais il y a aussi des artistes qui ne veulent pas se mettre ensemble pour travailler. pour revendiquer des espaces qu'on pourrait leur mettre à disposition pour travailler, pour confronter leurs expressions, pour travailler tout simplement ensemble, de manière à ce que leur travail soit beaucoup plus visible que ce qu'il est aujourd'hui. Voilà un tout petit peu ce que moi je voulais évoquer à propos de cette décolonisation des institutions des artistes. Ne pas avoir peur, rester aussi ceux qui sont les avant-gardistes pour dire voilà ce que nous voulons pour nous. Certains arrivent à le faire, mais d'autres sont encore trop réservés. Et à mon avis, il ne faut pas hésiter. Et l'espace que vous avez offert aujourd'hui pour discuter de ces questions, à mon avis, vont permettre justement de se réapproprier tous ces débats et peut-être le porter encore plus loin. Je vous remercie.
Madame, vous représentez une organisation de l'État de cette précision. Merci beaucoup.
That was great. We got more than we bargained for there, Edward. Before I introduce our final speaker, I just want to acknowledge, I've just observed Monsieur Max Diacoq in the audience. Very much enjoyed your performance, and we wanted to thank you so very much for that. And we're going to welcome to the platform Bénédicte Alliot, who's based in Paris, and she is the Director General of CITE, which is the largest artist residency program in the world, based in Paris. And we would like her to share some of what that experience is so that we can know a little bit more about that. So welcome, Bénédicte. Thank you.
Should I speak in English or in French? English, right?
That's your choice. This place is decolonized. Choose the language you want.
I just wanted to, just to mention that I'm speaking from that position of the other France that Montia was talking about yesterday. So bear with me, and it's going to be short. Thank you. It's a private foundation. It's 55 years old, and we have had a change of management 3 years ago. I arrived with a new chairman in 2016, and in view of the fact that, as Anneli was mentioning, it's a very, very big residency center, welcoming artists from around the world, from more than 100 countries, but also French artists. It's just a kind of parenthesis talking about institution and the relationship that individuals working within institutions can have with institutions and wanting to change institutions. I just want to mention that 20 years ago, when I defended my PhD on Derek Walcott, Toni Morrison, and V.S. Naipaul, and I then applied for a position as assistant professor in the Paris University. And that position was labeled new literatures. And those new literatures were actually the literatures of the Caribbean and of the African American world. At the time, I was very impatient, and I knew right from the start that I would not be able to stay for very long in that kind of institution. And I did not, I guess, have the self-confidence to believe that as an individual I could try and change the institution. So, but that was a case in point about how conservative I think some of our institutions in France can be, or used to be. I have no clue today how they are. But coming to Cité Internationale des Arts, our realization was that, and we became aware of the urgency to set up a new project, and start a process of de-institutionalizing it, meaning, in French terms, making it less bureaucratic and more flexible. And so we started that, and we started that by setting up new projects and also looking and exploring areas in the world where we have either no representation within CITE. We don't have any partnerships with those areas in the world, so we are actually lacking information as to what these contemporary artistic scenes are. But also we have a responsibility in also, I think, letting the Parisian audiences, but also the audiences of the rest of the French territory know about those scenes and those artists, writers, curators, etc. And one of the big silences was, we're not surprised, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Guyane, but also in the Indian Ocean, Réunion and Mayotte. And then if you look at more broadly, indeed, the Caribbean in general, Latin America, huge parts of Latin America. We've been developing also, and that's what's also quite new, but very important for us, residencies for writers, playwrights, art critics, curators, cinema directors, etc., apart from the visual artists, musicians, etc. So that we have, we try to, artists at the same time, trying to both also stimulate exchanges, communication, and by introducing different kinds of discourses and voices that are unheard of, or almost unheard of, well, in that other France. And so we're looking at that, and we're setting up new curatorial residencies with some other parts of the world, but trying to also make curators, these artists, come to France, come to Paris, but also providing them different parts of France, and also again in Europe. And we're also setting up these kinds of residencies with some other parts of the world where we have secured funding for, or partners, such as the first one that we're going to do with a foundation in Taiwan and a foundation in Japan, so that we'll have curators that can apply and can circulate in these different parts of the world. Now, regarding the Caribbean, we've started a program thanks to the support of the French state. We started some programs with Guadeloupe, Martinique, and we are now securing funding from private foundations to enlarge that to one of the priorities. So hear me. And I left some brochures, but you have my contacts, and I'd be very happy if we can pursue that conversation more privately. We are tired, on est fatigué. It's been wonderful being here, and I want to thank Tilting Axis 5, Annalie, Holly, Mario, Tobias, Lise, I mean the core team, et Jacques Martial, toute l'équipe de Mémorial ACTe, because it's been a fantastic experience. It's been simply an experience. And I think we were talking about the role of individuals, but
Hello, Tilting Axis delegates. I'm Amanda Coulson, the Executive Director of the National Art Gallery. To all my friends and colleagues that I know already, I'm so sorry I couldn't join you this year. To all the new potential friends and colleagues, I have what I hope is good news, and that's that next year we
have a tentative date in April of next year, and we very much look forward to welcoming you all. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to break the format a little bit. So you won't be sitting in auditoriums anymore. We'll be moving across Nassau. So yeah, stay tuned for more.
I'm so excited about that. So at this moment, we're about to close down. We were planning to, we've developed a kind of a, for you to do that while you were here and things were fresh in your mind, but we don't have access to Wi-Fi, so we're going to with an email and share that with you and of your considerations on board when we're shaping future iterations of Tilting Axis. So there are a couple of things. One is that if people are interested in the idea of hosting a future iteration of the Tilting Axis Forum, please let us know. If you want to partner in any way in terms of maybe linking your institution with us to offer a fellowship, you've had information from Lise and Natalie and Tiffany about forming an alliance with a consortium of Dutch partners with whom we will be launching a Tilting Axis Fellowship. And the host institution is the Het Nieuw Institute, which is based in Rotterdam, and a number of other cultural institutions between Rotterdam and Amsterdam. Our call will go out probably in July or August, and it will run for 4 to 6 months in 2020 between Rotterdam. So the region Guadeloupe and the patrimonial, the SEM Patrimonial de Guadeloupe, and of course the Mémorial ACTe, Jacques and his entire team, Manuela, Melanie, Cynthia, Frederick, Augustin, all of the translators have all been amazing, and all of the staff. I mean, really, it's been a privilege for us to be here. When I began on the first day talking about the notion of artists as orphans, I couldn't have imagined during the last few days how this incredible thread of the spirits, the ancestors, the Loas, the institutions, all of you, creating and building this roving home that Tilting Axis is, that is the safe space for us to be able to gather and to talk about the arts and shifting the ground under our feet every year as we come together. Move into the cocktails at 6 o'clock rather than going back to the hotel and coming back. So thank you very much for being here, and we will see you in 2020.